So welcome to the very first Granny Square Club. I'm really excited. I think this is going to be a lot of fun for Project Mondays. If I got stuff sticking out here everywhere. So the first project, and I'm picking, I'm willing to take ideas for things you might want to make out of different grannies. I've kind of got an idea how I want to do over the year, but I figured doing something like this with a basic granny square and making something useful out of it would be a great way to start. So that's what we're going to start with today. I'm going to hold this up and then I'll do it on the camera. But here's the first granny square. It doesn't have the handles yet because that's next month. And I'm still working that out. But this is the first granny square bag based on the pattern that we're doing, which I'll show you in just a second. I think it came out great. It's a nice size. I mean, I can get a nice project in there. It does have holes because anything you make out of granny squares is going to have holes. That's just the nature of the beast. But if you were listening to Instagram, it can be lined, and I'm going to work with Ingrid, who is a master seamstress and quilter, to help me figure out what the best way to line it. And then I'll write that up and share it with you in the end. So it's definitely possible to line it so that things won't fall out. This one I'm going to, I think, keep as I'm doing it. I don't think I'm going to line this particular one, but I'm making a second one that then I'll line. So you can see the different options. So let's look at, I'm going to start sharing my screen here. My camera. Okay, so the pattern we're working on is the Granny Square Bag by Carolyn Calderon. It is a paid pattern. I did look at some free patterns and I wasn't particularly thrilled. Every pattern has its quirks, and this one has been in my queue for a long time. I think it's really appealing. She's got a lot of positives to it. So I decided going with a paid pattern was a better way to go. There are lots of free patterns out there as well, but I really did like this one. It had a lot of positive reviews, but like any pattern, I found things that I wanted to change. So I'm going to share that with you and ways to make it a little bit easier. Okay. But I am going to share, zoom in here. Just a little things that I do love. If you're looking for a pattern, knitting or crochet, things that I think are really good. So she gives a skill level. I would agree that it's beginning intermediate. You would not want this to be your first crochet project for sure. Okay. But if you've got your basic crochet skills down, it is not, I would say it is an advanced beginner. Let's put it that way. She gives you an overall size. If you make the squares to her size, it'll tell you overall what the size of the bag will be. And I got pretty close to that, and I'll share that with you. What yarn she used, and she does say the gauge is not critical, and it isn't critical. If your squares are smaller, you're going to have a smaller bag. If your squares are bigger, you're going to have a bigger bag. It's up to your discretion and your liking of what kind of fabric you like. All right. Here are the other things I always look for in a good pattern. She's got abbreviations for any terms that she uses. So always know where those are. Some patterns don't include them, and sometimes people make up their own abbreviations. So I appreciate this very much. And it gives you an idea of what kinds of things are going to be covered. You don't have to necessarily read the whole pattern, but I got to know how to chain. Let me zoom in just a little. I need to know how to double crochet, single crochet, although I think that's not until the handle. How to do a slip stitch, spaces, stitches, wrong side, and a yarn over. Pretty basic. And then she gives notes. Always try to look for something with notes because these can be really, really helpful. The first one is critical. It is written in US terminology. Crochet patterns could be written, they can be English, but they could be UK terms or US terms. The problem with it is that they use the same symbols, but they mean different things in UK terms than they do in US terms. So this one is all US terminology, which I like. You can do a UK one. You just have to do a little translation. When they say DC for double crochet, they actually need a single crochet, okay? The right side is always facing, which means that we're not going to be turning when we're, let me pull out a little granny here. Granny squares do have a right side and a wrong side. They are not much different. These are my ends that need to be cut. It looks a little flatter, not quite so finished on the wrong side. You're always going to be looking at the right side of your work. You're never going to be turning it over like you do rows, because we're going to be working in the round. So you always want to have your right side facing, okay? If you screw up, it's not the end of the world, just keep going. All right, a chain 3 does count as a double crochet throughout this. That's a really important thing to know in any crochet pattern, whether you're in, that's usually referring to their beginning chain of the stitches or the rows or the rounds. Sometimes it counts as a double crochet and or a single or whatever, and sometimes it doesn't. So when they tell you, pay attention, because then that will help you through the whole thing. This pattern has you changing colors after each round, but we're going to talk about that in a second. And you're going to begin rounds 2 through 5 in any corner space, okay? So just, these are like the highlights of things you need to know to make the pattern work, okay? So I'm going to move that over. Hopefully everybody has the pattern, was able to get it. If you have any trouble, you can let me know. If you're just kind of paying attention, just for the granny square part of it, she does have, and she goes by this Carolyn Calderon. She has a YouTube channel under the name The Purple Poncho, or Purple Poncho. I don't think it's I think it's just Purple Poncho. And she does do a video on the basic granny square using the same terminology, okay? So you could go back and look at that, and she's got some other patterns and things on there. So if you're just kind of here to learn about granny squares, totally fine. If you're making the bag, you do need the pattern. All right. So I've got some notes here. The pattern was written in worsted weight yarn, for worsted weight yarn, which just means that's what she did it in. I'm going to zoom out here. This one here, I did make out of worsted weight yarn. This is out of the Sheepgist Callista, which is a worsted weight double gassed cotton, which means it is a very matte, smooth looking cotton. It doesn't have a shine to it like a mercerized cotton. I really liked it. Some people find it, because it is a really kind of has a loose spin on it, I find it a little splitty. Okay, I found I didn't have any trouble working on it. We used to use this as beginners, and we've switched because if you're struggling, it can be a little splitty. Just know that. We also have a newer yarn and a lot of brand new colors in another worsted weight cotton called Coastal Cotton from Queensland. That is a really lovely yarn. I've been using it for the Amigurumi Club. It would make I think my next bag is going to be out of that. Excuse me. Why cotton? It doesn't have to be cotton. It could be acrylic, it could be wool, it could be a cotton blend. Here's what I suggest you don't use though. Don't use if it's going to be a bag. If you're just making granny squares for a blanket or a garment, or that's different. Because it's a bag and it's going to have things in it and it's going to stretch, I do not recommend a superwash wool. Superwash wool has a lot of stretch to it, and you will get a lot more stretch if you've got stuff in there and you're carrying it and you've got a handle pulling on it. So for the bag, I don't recommend a superwash wool. You could absolutely use 100% wool, like Germantown or wool stock, or you could use an acrylic, which would be like Chunky Monkey or the Truly Scrumptious, which are more of a worsted weight. So I got pretty close to, let me grab my tape measure, what she had recommended. I think I was a little under in my square size. But honestly, I didn't really care. I knew I was going to be close. So she recommended the individual square would be 6.5 by 6.5. So I'm getting like right at 5. So it's a little under. If I had wanted this to be exactly her size, I could have done another round. I could have added another color to my granny squares to make the squares bigger. Not a problem. All of that has to do with your tension and the yarn you're using and the hook you're using. I could have used a slightly larger hook. I could have used a slightly thicker yarn. All of those things are options. The nice thing is there's no wrong answer to that. You really can use any yarn you want to. You can use scraps. We had a couple people today who are using from Blue Sky Fibers, the sweater, which is a half cotton, half wool yarn. Beautiful. I think that'll work out great. That's in the worsted weight category. I am making a second one, and I put a few of the squares together in a DK weight. This is the Soft Fun, which is a cotton acrylic blend. And it is a thinner yarn. It is DK. I'm using a finer, smaller hook. So my overall, if I just use the 4 colors for the rounds, not including the joining color, which is surrounding all of them, it would have been a much smaller bag. So I added an extra color. I just did an extra round, and now these squares are roughly the same size as these squares, and I'll have a similarly sized bag. If somebody today is using this yarn and wanted more of almost like a handbag, something smaller, so she's only going to do 3 rounds. So her squares overall will be smaller. The crux of it is it doesn't really matter. As long as all of your squares that you're putting together are the same size, it'll work. It'll sew up, it'll work, it'll become a bag. Okay. So you really can pick if you've got scraps, as long as they're all the same weight, put them together. If some of them are, if some of the scraps are superwash wool, throw it in there if you want to. I just wouldn't make the whole thing in superwash wool. And I certainly wouldn't make the handle out of superwash wool, because that's really going to be where a lot of the stretch could happen. Okay. So just know that going forward. So here I can lay this on top. You can see they're roughly, I added an extra round and I got roughly the same size. So it's going to be close. This one I am going to try to line. This is going to be my little prototype for lining, and I'll show you how I started these separately. So making the granny squares. This one obviously is very scrappy. I just kind of went over to the wall and picked a whole bunch of colors. Her pattern says 8. I think I've got 3, 6, 9. I have 11 colors here. 12 if you count the black, which is your main color, which outlines each of the squares and creates the handle. Okay. I just liked all of these colors together. And I just randomly picked, started with one, did the next round, and just laid them out in front of me. And then all of a sudden I realized, I had a lot of this color. So then I took that color out of my mix, put it to the side so I wouldn't use it again, so I could really get the range of colors. And honestly, I didn't really love it until I outlined it in the black. It's that one single color that frames each square that really kind of brings it all together. I was like, this is really going to look like a hodgepodge. And it looks scrappy, but I feel like it looks finished. It didn't have to be black. I could have done, she has an example in the, here done in white. I'm not allowed to have anything white. I will get anything white dirty in about 5 seconds flat. For sure, the handle of a bag is going to be ruined. My kids always tell me you should only wear tie-dye now because then you're covered. So I will, the one thing I will say about the black, it's a little harder to see when you're working, particularly when it comes to the handle. I maybe would not have chosen black. So if your eyes have a hard time seeing black yarn, maybe don't pick black. Maybe pick a dark gray, which still would have looked fabulous on this, I think. It just ties everything together. Okay. Let me just look at my notes and see what I'm doing here. If you've got questions, always feel free to type up. I'm happy to answer questions as we go, even if it's something I'm coming to. So don't worry about that. Okay, I'm going to show you the basics of the granny square in just a second, but I was just trying to get an overview in picking your colors. All right, so this one was scrappy. This one is not scrappy. I decided to do one where every square is exactly the same. So I picked my palette of colors and decided which one, instead of starting with the 4, I started with 5 and then added this one to be my outlining color. That will also be the color of my handle. And I decided the order. And instead of doing one round and then the next round and then the next round, because I'm doing them all the same, I started assembly lining it. So I made all of my centers because I was using all the same color. Let me zoom in a little. There we go. So I made all of my centers first because you're cutting the yarn after each round. And that's, so I made you're making 13 squares for this bag. So I made 13 white centers. And then I came back and I did the second round in all of them, and then the third round. And now I'm up to I'm making my stack of these. So I just had one yarn out at a time, okay? So you can do it that way if you know you want every square to be the same. It was just a nice way to just have one yarn in my bag at a time. And it gave me a little bit of focus too, because, okay, I have to finish with this yarn tonight in order to get it done. It gave me like a little to-do list to do it that way. Okay. All right. So those are the grannies. For this bag, you do need 13 granny squares. Like I said, they can be any size you want them to be. Right. I'm going to lower this just a little, bear with me. Trying to get the best overview here with the camera. Let's turn the brightness up just a bit. Okay. Let's do that. Okay. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
Is that okay? Okay, good. All right. All right. So in the pattern, another thing that I liked about this pattern is that she gives you, ooh, that's very good. There we go. She gives you illustrations for each round, which are also, if you were to go to her video, so you can see exactly as you're working through here, just a nice visual of what each round looks like, where it starts, where it finishes. I really like that. And they aren't too complicated. She's not adding too much in here, okay? And then she also gives you in the end a layout of how the squares lay out and fold and become the bag, okay? Which we'll do next month. This month, all we're working on is making our squares. Next month, we're going to join them all together and talk about handles, okay? All right, so she says in her pattern that you are going to start with a chain 4 and to make a ring. There's lots of ways to make a ring in crochet. Well, there's 2 really good ways to make a ring in crochet. One of which is just like she says, to make a slip knot on your hook and to chain 4.
Maybe you should close it too.
Granny squares are not done in rows. They are done in rounds. And so they always start from the center and work out with the right side always facing you, okay? So here's the method that she is talking about in the pattern. And then I'm going to show you a second method. Let me just get the camera angle. So I chained 4 stitches. Now I'm going to take my hook and I'm going to go back to the very first chain that I made right here. And I'm going to join it with a slip stitch. A slip stitch has no yarn over in the middle. And here's what I mean. I'm going to go back into that first chain I'm going to grab the working yarn and I'm going to pull it back through and pull it through the loop on the hook with no yarn over in the middle. And what that does is it's folded that little chain 4 back into a circle with a hole in the center called the ring, okay? And you can fit a lot of stitches into the ring. It looks small, but it is mighty, okay? So that's one way to make a ring to work into. The second way, which is my preferred way, once I learned how to do it, is called the magic ring. And the magic ring, I have tried to record a video, and every time I did, somebody walked in. So as soon as we're done with this class, there's nobody in the store. I'm going to record doing just the magic ring and post it on the website as well as this class, so you can see how it's done and just focus on that. The magic ring starts with the tail of your yarn, and you could find videos on this online doing it 100 different ways. But this is the way that worked for me and made the most sense. You have to take the tail of the yarn, not the working yarn. You have to take the tail of the yarn, and I lay it over the palm of my hand, okay? Hold it with my thumb, wrap it around, and I do those 3 fingers, and then I crisscross it. I'm holding the end so it doesn't pull. I turn my hand over, and I've got 2 parallel lines there. Let me just darken it like this. All right, so I've got a crisscross on my palm, parallel lines on the top of my hand, and I've got this secured. I'm pinching it here so it's really staying in place, okay? You're going to take your hook and go underneath. I'm going underneath the first parallel line, grabbing the second one, pulling it back under and twisting it up. And then I'm going to go over that first line again, grab the second yarn again, and I'm watching the camera, not my hands. Grab that yarn again and pull it through the loop on your hook. Okay. And when you slide your fingers out, what you have is a loop on your hook, and you've got this ring with your tail is kind of curled into it. And why it's called the magic ring is when you pull the tail, it will tighten the ring, which is what allows you to get, it allows you can see the hole here in the center. If I pulled on the tail, it will completely, wrong one, it will completely close the hole. I'm having issues with the brightness here. And you don't see the hole at all. You cannot, when you do the chain 4 and join, you cannot tighten up that hole. There will always be, it might be very small, but you will always have a tiny hole. It is a total preference. They both work exactly the same, okay? I'm gonna work into the magic ring, but you can certainly do, and I'll show one when I'm done with this, into the chain 4 ring. It works the same way. All right, so you've got a ring. I'm going to be making the stitches into the ring. You've never worked in the round before on crochet. I'm just going to tighten that stitch on my hook. Again, you don't want it too tight. You don't want it too loose. And again, like she said, gauge is not critical. As long as you're happy with your fabric, it'll be just fine. We're going to chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. And if you remember from her notes, she said that a chain 3 always counts as a double crochet everywhere in this pattern. So this is really our first double crochet. And now we're gonna, and I'm looking at round 1 on our pattern, if you're following along at home. Chain 3 counts as 1 double crochet throughout. I'm going to do 2 double crochets next. And then I've got my repeat, which is what's in the asterisk, chain 2, 3 double crochet. And I'm going to repeat that 3 times. Chain 2, 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. And then I'm going to end with a chain 2. I'm doing all of that into the ring. When you hear something that's like a granny blanket or a granny square, Granny generally refers to a grouping or a cluster, often referred to as a cluster of 3 double crochets. So since my chain 3 here counts as a double crochet, and I just did 2 more double crochets, this would be considered a granny cluster, okay? And that's what we're starting with. So I did my chain 3, 2 double crochets. Now I'm going to do a chain 2 and 3 more double crochets. 1. And if you, I'm holding the ring open, and I'll stop here in a second. I'm just going to stitch. I'm holding the ring open with my fingers so that I can work into it. It doesn't have to be connected as a circle until I pull the tail. It's totally fine that these are all straight. I'll show you how that magic works in just a second. All right, there's another grouping of 3 double crochets, and I've got a chain 2 in between them. Your chain 2s are always going to be your corners for your granny square. Let's pull off some. Put chain 2 again. And 3 double crochets. Round 1, this is round 1 we're doing. And round 2, set up your granny square. Rounds 3 through 100 million, however many rounds you want to make, will always be the same after that. Round 1 and round 2 are always a little different because it's your setup for your granny square. Chain 2. So right now I have 1 granny cluster here, 1 granny cluster here, 1 granny cluster here. I need 1 more because it's 4 corners. 1, 2, and the pattern says to end with a chain 2. All right, so here's where the magic ring works. I can pull my tail. It's going to tighten it all up. I'm just going to pull this so it doesn't come out. Let me see if you can see how it closes out. Okay. And it pulls it around. I can pull that center as tight as I want. To finish the round, every round will finish this exact way. So here's where we started with a chain 3. I'm going to slip stitch into the top of the chain 3. Let me zoom in just a minute. All right, so here is chain 1, chain 2, chain 3. If you were to accidentally go over here to the top of this double crochet, it is not the end of the world. What most people forget to do is to finish with a chain 2. And here's why that's important. Let me slip stitch and then I'll show you. And go into the stitch, grab the yarn, pull it through, and pull it through. No yarn overs in the middle. Okay. That last, so you can see we've got what the basic starts of a square. That last chain 2 you made the last corner. If I were to omit it, which I have done before, and I just slip stitched, I would have 1, 2, 3 corners, not my 4th corner. Okay, so you always have to remember to finish with a chain 2 and slip stitch. Every round will end that way, and it won't take you long to remember. You'll make that mistake a couple of times and then you'll get so annoyed you won't make it again. Okay, so here is what's not in her pattern, which I find really, really helpful, because if you change colors every round, you're going to have a lot of ends to weave in. Here's how to avoid that. I am going to, instead of cutting my yarn and pulling it through and changing colors, I am going to slip stitch across the tops of the next couple of stitches. So I'm going to go underneath. If I look at the top, I'm just going underneath the 2 V's, I'm not going deep into the stitch, and I'm slip stitching. And every time you slip stitch, it's like weaving in an end. You are locking that yarn in place. It doesn't add a lot of bulk because there's no real height to the stitch. every round will be bigger. So on this first round, you can only really do 2, maybe 3 stitches. I'm going to squeeze one more in. And just slip stitch in there. Now I can cut my yarn. And I would say, because we've already woven in some, you don't have to leave a huge tail. I'm just going to leave maybe 2 inches. Okay. I can tighten up my center. The center is the only one you're going to end up having to weave away, because there is a way to work over that, but it gets really complicated with the magic ring. It's just easier just to weave those away, which 13 compared to 13 times 5 rounds is a lot better. So I cut my yarn, just pull my loop through, and I still have my square. I've done most of my weaving already, and I'll show you in the next round how I continue that. And then all you have to do then is just cut your ends. You don't have to weave them away later. So it's a real time saver just to get into the habit of just doing a few slip stitches at the end of your round. After you've joined, do a few slip stitches and cut. Okay. So that's how you do it with the magic ring.
Excuse me, Pam, can I ask you a question?
Please do. Please do.
I have 3 questions, actually, really short. The
That's
last one, in picking up and slip stitching across,
Yes.
what do you think about using that, joining your next color there and picking up in the last loop to pick up the next color and then work over the tail as you go around?
So
In addition to what you're doing, the very last slip stitch you did,
yeah,
that you would pick up the next color. What I would do is, that's just me, it's not wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong at all. But to pick up the loop with the next color, and then I would crochet over the tails for a few more stitches over both tails, just to be
correct.
extra.
And you can absolutely do that. I'm just going to take out the one that I did here. So what she's talking about here is, so, and here's where it could or couldn't be a problem. Every round needs to start in this chain 2 space.
Right.
From now on, okay? So if you want to do that, and you absolutely could, you just need to slip stitch your way over and into that chain so that you get to the chain 2 space.
Right.
Totally fine. And then what she's talking about is then, let's switch color.
Join the next color in the chain 2.
Correct. So I could do it like this. And now I have my new color ready to do. And I'm going to start and go up and then work over the tails. You could absolutely do that, Carol. That's totally fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And
go ahead with your other questions. Yeah.
A separate opinion. I don't remember exactly who, so I don't want to name anybody, but doing the double crochet, this is totally aside, but the double crochet to join instead of the joining with slip stitch, there are a couple of online video people that I've seen use a double crochet as going into that direct double crochet instead of actually.
You can absolutely, if you find that easier, because you've got that chain 2 between your last stitch and where you're joining, you could absolutely go into the next double crochet as opposed to the top of the chain 3. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I'm not sure I like it that way, but I've seen it that way.
You absolutely, because sometimes going into the top of a chain 3 is a little harder and it's easier to go into.
Yeah. I had that when I was starting out on my grannies.
Right. The reason why either one is fine in a granny square like this is because you've got that chain 2 space that separates. If you were doing and when we do other granny style things where you maybe don't have that space, if you skip the chain 3, you might be losing a stitch.
Right.
Okay. So in this particular pattern, it absolutely doesn't matter. And I do find it easier to go into the top of the next double crochet as opposed to the top of the chain 3. Yeah.
Yep.
I totally agree. All right. You said 3 questions. You got another one for me?
Yeah. Just something else I noticed. It is the purple poncho. And I want her to get paid, but I'm a little poor and the free copy is available on the website.
Perfect.
And I did find a little cheat. You guys didn't do it, but with if you scroll on her website, Jimmy Beans does have a kit that
Nice.
I used. I stole the colors. I stole the colors to try to get my colors because that's what I was talking about at the
Yes.
in the Instagram. Because I
Yes.
have no clue. I only know that I'm using Red Heart Super Saver. Sorry, don't
Right.
kill me.
Oh,
But
totally fine. Absolutely.
it's what I've got.
And that's exactly what you should use. Absolutely. And I think that's fine. I'm glad you found a site with this, we had some color options. Yes.
They have a dark one and it's in Chunky Monkey. You guys have Chunky Monkey, but it's
Yes.
a dark option and a light option. I was able to do some stash diving with my Red Heart Super Saver.
Perfect. Oh, I'm glad. Perfect. You know what?
So
That's often what I do. There are sites like Jimmy Beans is one I go to all the time for inspiration on colorways. The yarnery.com is another one that I go to a lot. Espace Tricot in not Toronto, what's the other one? Montreal. Has great color inspiration palettes and things. So I'm totally with you, Carol. That's you're doing the exact right thing. Yep.
I was just clueless. I tried to see what her pattern of color was.
Yes.
I couldn't figure it out. So what I'm going to
Yes.
do is I'm just lining the colors up and I'm going to take each one, 1, 2, 3, and just pick up the center from the next color. And that'll give me 8 squares. And then the last 4, I'm probably going to do one color and then skip a color or do something or make the last 4 the same as the first 4. I haven't.
Perfect.
But no,
I think that's a great
that's why I asked you how you did your colors, because the colors,
Right.
when someone says pick your own colors, that's when I go, help.
Exactly. Right.
Help. So
And
anyway.
honestly, I mean, we've got people here who've graduated from art school. So I pick out my palette and then they repick my palette. I pick what I like and they're like, no. So I'm just going to demonstrate real quick how, if you're doing it as a chain 4, I connected, like she does in the description, and then I chain 3, and I'm going to work into, and I could work over my tail at the same time. It's easier to show when I do the next round, but I'm going to do the same stitches, 2 double crochet. I'm just diving into the center of that ring I made. I just wanted to show that real quick. What that
And
looks
it's perfectly okay to have that hole in the middle, Pam?
It absolutely is. So the thing with doing it this way, now I'm going to fit a whole bunch more stitches, so that hole is going to get smaller. You just can't tighten it. That's the only difference. And it's totally fine. I mean, you're going to have holes everywhere because it's a granny. So until recently, this was how everybody made it. The magic ring is a relatively new, acceptable thing to do it that way. And let me do my other clusters here, and I just want to get on to the next round here. So either way, you're going to end up with something that looks like 4 granny clusters. There I go, splitting that yarn. And 4 corners. So there's 2 of my granny clusters with a chain 2 space, which is half of the granny there. All right, so either way, you're going to end up with something that looks like this. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to just pull this up where I left it. Okay, so round 2. I'm going to move to another color. So we've got 4 corners, but what we don't have are side spaces. Right now we only have corner spaces. Your side spaces get developed on round 2. That's why round 1 and round 2 are your setup rounds. Everything after that will act exactly the same. You'll just have an increase in your side spaces. I'm going to start with the slip knot on my hook. You can join any round. You can join in any corner space. If you're going to do this method where we're kind of slip stitching our ends, I don't suggest starting in this very first corner. And here's why, because I'm about to show you how to go over your ends at the same time. And if you do it in the same place, in the same corner every time, it's going to be just a little extra bulk all on one side. It's not much, but when it adds up, it could make it a little wonky. So I'm just going to turn it, and I'm going to start in this corner. I could also start in this corner, doesn't matter. So I'm going to join with a slip stitch. Go through and pull through. Okay, I'm going to tighten it up on here. You will be making, because we're in a corner space, we're going to be making our new corner first. And a corner is made up of a granny cluster, 3 double crochets, a chain 2, and 3 double crochets. We're going to do all of that in this space. But your round starts not making the first half of the corner, it starts with making the second half of the corner. So we're going to start with a chain 3. And then chain 3, 1, don't lose your tail, 2, 3, okay. And I don't want this slip stitch to be all the way over here on this side, because once I work around, I'm going to have to finish with some double crochets on that side. So put your slip stitch roughly in the middle-ish, and then you won't have to struggle to fit stitches in. You'll see when we get around. So now I've got this tail here of where I slip stitch to join. I want to work over, it's called working over your tail. So I'm just going to lay it across my crochet. I'm just going to hold it with my fabric like that. I'm going to yarn over and make 2 double crochets. 1, 2. And I have caught that tail underneath those double crochets I just made. Okay. So what I have made here is the last half of that corner space. Now I'm going to go to the next corner. I'm just going to lay that across. Now I'm going to do in this corner space 3 double crochets, a chain 2, and 3 double crochets. No chain space in between. The only place you do a chain 2 is when you're in the corner. 1, 2, 3, chain 2. You can see I just have pulled my end across, and I'll show you how to tighten that up in just a second. And do 3 more double crochets in that same space. 1, pull out some yarn. And I'm just going over that tail end. I'm just catching it underneath my stitches.
Could you go back and start that row again?
Absolutely, I would be happy to. Let me just show you what it looks like, and then I will do it again. Okay, what I have just done here, in that corner space from around 1, I have made a new corner space, which is 3 double crochets, a chain 2, and 3 double crochets. Where I started was right here, and I'll take it out and do it again. A chain 3 and 2 double crochets. I did not do a chain to bridge this gap. Just kind of reaching over creates this space, and that's what your first side space is going to be. It looks like there's a chain space there. There is no chain space there, okay? So let me do it one more time for you. I'm glad you're asking questions. This is good. It's sometimes hard on Zoom to make sure people are getting it. Okay. So I'm going to pick any corner. What I don't want to do, I don't want to pick this corner because I've got this end I want to catch and go over. And if I do it here, I'm going to have the yellow one at the same time, and it might be a little bulky. I'm just going to pick a different corner to start.
But if I were just continuing in my color, it doesn't matter then?
If you are doing, that's a really good question. If you are not changing colors, let's see if I've got one here. Yeah, let me just take this out real quick. if you were not changing colors, which you don't have to do, you could just do it. Finishing. When you get to the end of the round, chain 2, like normal. And I'm going to do it the way Carol was saying. Instead of to the top of the chain 3, I'm going to go into the top of this first double crochet we made. Slip stitch to join. Okay. So here's a couple of options you could do if you are not changing colors. Your next round still needs to start in a chain 2 space. You could either slip stitch your way over till you got to this space, or you can actually kind of slip stitch back and start here. I think it's easier to go a little bit forward. Or you can finesse it a little and just dig in there. I'm gonna run out of yarn, but
Yeah, sorry.
that's okay. It's okay. And do a chain 3 from there. And
So
then
you're saying slip stitch through that first
cluster
Okay.
to get to the next chain 2 space, and then chain 3, or you could just make 3 double crochets if you're not changing colors.
Oh,
Does that
You don't have
make
to chain-
sense?
yeah, you don't have to chain, you just do them in the space.
If you're not changing, you don't have to. If you're not changing colors, you can just slip
Okay.
stitch your way over
Okay.
and start there. So you could do it that way too. I'll show
Wait,
you.
so after you slip, just one more question.
Yeah, of
After you
course.
slip
Yeah.
stitch- After you slip stitch the 3 times, then you just go right away into the opening and into your corner and make the double crochets, or do you have to chain 2?
You could just make, if you're not, are you going to change colors on any
No.
round?
I'm not changing colors because I'm not doing that pattern, doing something else completely, and I'm just trying
Totally
to
fine. So here's
Yeah.
what I would do, Jackie. I would slip stitch your way over, and this will only happen on the first round, okay?
Right.
Go into this space, do 3
Mhm.
doubles, a chain 2, 3 doubles. Go across, 3 doubles, chain 2, 3 doubles. 3 doubles, chain 2, 3 doubles. Come around to the last one because you started over here. 3 doubles, chain 2, 3 doubles, finish, slip stitch to the next corner, repeat.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Now, as the granny square gets bigger,
Well, it definitely makes sense. It's that
Yes.
I'll probably be in to see you.
well, then I'll get to see you. That will be great. Okay, so let me just take this out, and I'm gonna
Yeah, go ahead and do this with the other people. I don't want to keep them
No,
from.
no, you're absolutely fine. So there's lots of ways you could vary this. So these are all excellent questions.
Well, already it makes more sense than when I was trying to figure this out
Good,
myself.
good, good, good. All right, let me just slip stitch this one over a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna do this round one more time, and we're gonna get to the next round.
Can I throw something in there? What I understand is that the 3 doubles, if you just go into the 3 doubles and you're not changing colors, the other 2 pull the first one up tall enough. So you don't have to have the 3 chains if you're not changing colors. So that's like the double crochet join that I was asking about.
Oh,
not
right.
actually so totally, there's still a little tiny lean in there, but the other stitches, like in knitting, when the other stitches, and crochet does the same thing, the other stitches balance
Yes,
to pull the other ones up.
Yeah.
So you don't have to have it there, but
Mhm.
is that what you were trying to say, Pam?
yes, it absolutely is. Yep. And that's what one of the things I love about an industry that doesn't have a standard pattern writing. Everybody can say it different ways. There's no right way to say it. You know, there's no concise, especially a lot of the crochet things are translated from other languages. And something is definitely lost in translation at times. All right, let me get to this. I want to show you how to go over two ends at the same time. Okay, so I've done my first corner here. Okay, so I started here and I'm going to flip it over so you can see, because that's where there's that tail part. I don't see it from the front. If this was a double-sided blanket, if you were going to see both sides, you might care about this. For this bag, I don't so much care about this, but there is a way I can take the end and snug it up there and make it less visible that way. But from the front, you don't ever see it. It was slip stitched here and locked in, and now I've worked over the end. I could trim it now and be fine, okay? I'm just gonna leave it there. So now I've come to where I had my last end from the previous round. I'm gonna work over both ends a little bit and lock them both in at the same time. So just by laying them across and you have to kind of forget about them. Lay across your crochet. Start with 3 doubles. It's usually the very first part that gets a little, but know that if they start to kind of wind their way around, you can always at the end of the round finesse them to the back again. Like this has started to pop up. I'll show you how I pull it to the back. But I'm always happy to know that I don't have to weave ends at the end. Weave ends away. Make another corner here. Two, and one more. If you forget, and I think I found one here, I only did 2 double crochets here. Honestly, if I didn't point it out to you, you probably never would have seen it. Don't let that stop you on something like this, okay? I realized I only did 2 doubles on that corner. Big deal. I'm not fixing it now. It's just gonna go. And honestly, are you ever gonna see it? Probably not. Fluff it up a little, whatever. So don't let that stop you. What will cause you that does cause us no problems in the pattern. What will cause problems if you forget the chain 2, because then you lose a corner. And then you're 3/4 of the way through a granny square top and you realize you've only been making 3/4. And you have to rip the whole sucker out because you don't. And just speaking from experience here. Because you realize you lost a corner somewhere along the way. Okay, so I have one more corner to finish. Oh, let me show you the back. That's where I was starting. Okay, so this that I was going over started to pop out just a little to the front. I'm just going to grab the end and I'm just going to finesse it to the back a little. There, perfect. I don't see it anymore, and I'm totally fine with that. And I could trim this right now and be done. I've gone over the purple and it's been slip stitched. It's been worked over. If you are really worried, you could absolutely leave these away. I would call this done. I like to cut them all at the end, but you could snip it right now and be done, okay? And one more corner, 3 doubles. And if any of it starts to pop out, we've actually left like 2 or 3 inches we've worked away. We could pull it out and weave it away better if something started to pop out. It's not like you've cut it really close to a knot or something like that, okay? It's not completely final. So 3 doubles, chain 2, and 3 doubles. All right, so here's where we started, which was the last part of that corner. So now I have to go in here and do 3 doubles. 3 doubles. End with a chain 2. This is where it's easy to make the mistake. Make sure you've got your chain 2 for your corner, and then slip stitch either in the top of the chain 3 or in the top of the, like Carol was saying, the top of the first double. I'm going to stop right there before I weave it away, or excuse me, slip stitch it away. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 corners, clear spaces. And now I have side spaces where I did not before. I have 4 sides, okay? And with those, so now your 2 setup rounds have been done. Now I have a slightly longer side. I can do a few more slip stitches if I wanted. And if you're sticking with the same color, you could just slip stitch over to your next corner space if you wanted to. All right. I just did a single crochet. Remember, when you slip stitch, no yarn over in the middle. Okay. There we go. So you can see you can see just a little bit of bulk, but you can't see it from down here in the previous row. So it goes away with every row that you do. Okay. Round 3. Round 3, through however many rounds you want to do. We're kind of done with the setup. Slip stitch. Choose a corner space. Again, I'm not going to choose this one. I'm going to pick so I don't add any extra bulk there. I'm just going to go across to the other side and start. You can start in any chain 2 space. Don't start in a side space. Always start in a corner space for this pattern. Chain 3. And double crochet. 1, 2. So now, instead of going all the way over to the corner, I'm going to go to a side space and I'm going to make 1 granny cluster with no chains. So just yarn over to make your double crochet, put 3 double crochets, or often referred to as a granny cluster, in that space. Okay. And I've created, for the next round, I've already created 1 space there. Now I'm ready to go to my next corner. So 3 doubles. Oh, and I didn't go over my end. Crud. That's okay. I'll go, when I pick up the yellow, I'll go over the yellow. So I already have an end to weave away here, so I didn't go over it. Chain 2. And 3 doubles. Into my side space now. Put a granny cluster there. Okay, and back to a corner. So you're always making stitches into spaces. The only time you're going into the tops of stitches is when you're doing your slip stitches. The rest of your crocheting will all be into spaces, which I think goes much faster than traditional crochet where you're trying to go into the top of each space. Okay, so here's how it's shaping up so far. I've got the half of my first corner. I've got 2 spaces now on this side. Last round I only had 1, now I have 2. Another corner, another 2 spaces, and another corner. Granny cluster in here, and I'm coming to this end, so I will work across it as I come to it. And you'll see this, so this is where that little extra bulk was. Once you go over it, you don't see it anymore. One, two. 3. So now I'm just going to lay that end across my crochet. I've already slip stitched it a fair amount, so it's fairly locked in. And make my last corner here. 2, 3. That little tug tightens it up. Chain 2. And make the second half of this corner space. 1, 2. Okay. I've got one more space and to finish my round, just like I did the previous round. One, 2, 3. And I'm back to the beginning. I'm going to make the first half of that corner space there. We already did the second half. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 2. That is the nice thing about crochet. You can pull out one stitch at a time. One more. 1, 2, and slip stitch. And we'll slip stitch over here a couple stitches. 1, 2. Let's just 4. My yarn. So do a quick, if you're new to granny squares, I would say do a quick check. Do I have 4 corners? I do in fact have 4 corners. And now I have 2 sides, 2 side spaces on each side. When you do the next round, so here's round 1, round 2, round 3. When you do round 4, you'll create, you still have your 4 corners, but you'll have 1, 2, 3 side spaces. Because I'm doing an extra round on this one, the next round I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4 side spaces on each side. So it can, like I said, you can make a whole blanket this way and never stop and just keep going and going and going. Okay. Any questions about making your rounds in granny squares? Good so far? Okay. Here's where I'm gonna venture from the pattern a little bit if you're following the pattern. Excuse me. Her instructions tell you to make, you're going to make 13 of these granny squares, and she says through round 4. Go through whichever, however big you're going to make your square. So for this one, I'm doing 5 rounds, and then my 6th round is my main color that I'm using. And then she says to do 1 square in your main color before you join them. She uses what's called a join as you go method. There are lots of ways to join your granny squares. The way she describes the join as you go is painful, and it hurt my head. And I figured we were going to have all levels of skill here, and I figured hurting your head was not a good place to start. So if you want to give it a go, give it a go. Here's what I'm going to say though, and what I recommend. I'm going to show you a different way to join your granny squares. And Liz was my test subject yesterday, and you said it was okay. Do your granny squares, all 13 of them, finish all of them in your joining color. Okay, so you'll have 13 squares that have your main color as your last round, however big you're going to make them, ready to go. And then what I'm going to show you is what's called a slip stitch join, which makes a nice, and that's what I did on the black bag. It makes a nice, even, flat, non-bulky join, which work and is much easier to do than the joinage your go as your first granny square project. We'll do something like that further in the year if you're going to continue to participate. But so don't do what she says in the pattern. Do your rounds, finish your rounds in your joining color, and have those 13 squares ready for next month. And then next month, what we're going to do, so we're going to talk about how to join them, how to lay them out and join them. And then I'm also going to show you how to do a handle. I was loving the black on this until I tried to work the handle. I'm actually really intrigued by the handle she uses in the pattern. It's a spiral crochet, but in black yarn. It's really, really painful. I'm going to muddle through it, but I have a couple other ideas for other options for different skill levels. So if you read ahead and you're looking and it sounds really confusing, don't worry, I'm going to have other options for you. The spiral crochet, you're basically making a tube. You're working in the round in a really small diameter, and you're making a tube, but you're working on the outside of the stitches. So there's lots of new things there, and I won't be showing it to you in black yarn. I'll be showing it to you in much brighter yarn. And it's really cool. I don't know if you can see the spiraling. It's actually very cool once you get the hang of it. But I don't know that it's for everybody. So I have a couple of other options that I'll show that are much more beginner friendly for your straps. And we'll show how to attach them. And by then, Ingrid and I will have worked out how to line a bag, and we'll share that too. So that's the plan going forward. Does anybody have any questions? Liz, what's your question, baby?
So you used worsted weight for yours. What size needle did you?
This one is worsted. This one is worsted weight. Worsted weight cotton.
What size needle?
And I used an H hook
H hook.
because I wanted a slightly tighter. Depending on what kind of fabric. I got a tighter fabric, which I wanted for a bag. If I was doing this for maybe a blanket, I might want it a little looser and drapier. But for a bag, I liked the H hook, and I did play around with it. For this one, which is soft on a DK, when we have beginners starting, this is the yarn we start with, and we start them on an H hook because you never know if they're going to be loose or tight, and it's a good place to start. I actually went down on this one to hold on. An H hook is, if you're looking at millimeters, is a 5 millimeter. I actually went down to a 3.75 millimeter for the soft fun DK because I wanted it to be a little tighter. I knew I was adding an extra round, and I did myself a little mock-up. You know, if I wanted the square a little bigger, I would have added another color.
Okay.
And just kept going until I got to the square. That's how I approached it.
And a 3.75 millimeter is what?
That's an F.
F is in Frank?
Right.
Okay.
But that works for me and my crochet tension. It might not work
for
you
Okay.
and your
Okay.
crochet tension, right?
Okay.
So when you're crocheting, you can adjust your tension in a lot of ways. You can change your yarn, you can change your hook. It's really hard to fight your natural tendency for how you hold the yarn and pull through. The height of your stitches is actually dependent on something called the golden loop. When you first do you yarn, if you're making a double crochet and you yarn over, let me switch back to the camera. Here's a little bonus tip. I learned this on, I was doing a blanket. No, I was doing a mandala. So I was doing a crochet in the round, and it had to fit in a ring, and I did it, and it was not going to fit in the ring. And I tried a different size crochet hook and I just wasn't getting it to fit. And what I learned was, let me do a real quick magic ring here. What I learned was that, oh, you know what? I could show you on this one that's already started. Let's do that. My next color is green. No, yeah, green. I can do it here. The height of your stitch is not so much dependent upon, your hook does play a role in it. What it really depends on is what's called this golden loop. And I'll show you what that is. When you, let me zoom in a little. When you go in, start with my yarn over for my double, and I dive into the stitch, I grab the yarn and I come up. This is what decides the height of your stitch. If you're a lifter, you're gonna have a really tall stitch. If it's really, really close, you're gonna have a short stitch. How high you pull this loop right here is what determines the height of your stitch. And I really had to work to be a little bit more level because I found I was a lifter. So my stitches were too high. And, if we're talking like, part of a millimeter, it's not a big deal until you've done like 30 rounds. And now it's 30 parts of a millimeter adds up pretty quick. So I have consciously had to work, and it's actually made me slow down my crochet a little bit, which has probably been a good thing. When I dive in and I grab that yarn, I just come back and I pull very little. I'm keeping it pretty close to the level. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. And that first loop that you pull up is called the golden loop. And there are videos on this too, you could find. I'm going to do another one the same way. So I've just found myself, I just kind of stop and I keep it pretty close. Not tight, but close. So I'm going to show you comparatively. This one I'm keeping close. The next cluster I'll do differently. Okay. Now this is how I previously would have done it. I would have pulled it up like that and finished my double crochet. And some patterns will tell you in a stitch, pull up till it's even, because they've accommodated for that in your stitch. This is much taller. So it will make the holes taller as well, if they were all a little bit taller. So if you're finding if you're playing with your gauge and you're not getting results with your hook, try this golden loop thing and see if just bringing your stitches down a little bit helps. Again, it's called golden loop, and I will try to put a link when I put this up on the website so you can see. There was one that was particularly good that really explained it really well. It's like, oh, as soon as I started doing that, every mandala I made fit in the ring perfectly. So it made a huge difference, and I had never thought about it that way. And it's not something when you're learning that you focus on. We're just happy to get the hook in the right hole, and keep going. How high you're lifting doesn't always matter. It's when it needs to fit somewhere that all of a sudden you realize, oh, so that's another way that you can adjust. If you're not liking the look of your fabric, this doesn't have to fit. You just have to like it. All right, I'm going to just look at my notes real quick and make sure I wrote down a bunch of stuff I wanted to make sure I told you. Okay, so make your 13 squares using your main color as your final round. Alternate where you start in your corners so you don't get bulky. I said that. I think I said everything. All right, so next month, come with your squares. If you don't have them done, no big deal. You can always watch the class later. It's not a big deal. But we're going to work on joining, how to do a slip stitch join, and how the layout works. And I figured out the easiest way to slip stitch join with the fewest cuts of yarn. Again, it's all about weaving in ends. I kind of mapped it out and figured out the right way. And then I'll show you some strap options. And then I'm always happy to come back, we'll go on to something else the next month, but if you need help with your strap, I'm always happy to pop, if you're not local, pop on Zoom with you anytime, and we can go over and work through things as well. So we're always here for you. Are there any other questions? Yes. Carol, do you have a question?
I decided to raise my hand because I wasn't getting to mute.
Yeah.
Can I get a group opinion on this? The lighting isn't very good. This square that I'm going to show is 6.5 inches diagonal.
I'm gonna spotlight you so I can show you. Okay.
It's 6.5 diagonal.
Okay.
6 this way, but I don't have I'm thinking when I do the border, it might be 6.5.
Okay.
Does it look thin? Does it?
I don't think so. Back it up just a little bit. Back it up just a little. I don't think it does. There you go.
And does it look okay?
I think it looks great.
Yeah, you don't have a hole in the middle.
No, I use magic glue.
The magic ring. Yeah, it looks great.
So this this looks like a normal for the bag tension. I think it works, but I had to go up two hook sizes. So I'm up to a J.
And you might have to play with that a little bit with your yarn. And if you're mixing yarns, you might.
They're all going to be super safe.
All the same. Okay. So if you are someone who's going to be mixing yarns using scraps, you might find your tension is a little different in between. But I don't think you have to worry about it for this. If you're making the bag, ultimately, if they're all the same size, or at least very, very close, you'll be just fine.
Right now it's about 5.5 to 6, and then 6.5 diagonal. So
perfect.
She didn't say diagonal, but that's okay. I was just like it was workable.
No, I think it's great. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Can I show you what I did? So, because I don't like randomness.
Yes. Let me spotlight you really quick.
I took all my yarn and I mapped out what I was doing.
I love you.
Because I didn't want to do too much of one color.
I love it.
That's pretty.
I love it.
It's modern art.
Keep that in a little work journal, because I love that.
That's pretty.
So I took little pieces of yarn and then I colored with colored pencil.
I love it. It's awesome. But now you're going to have something that you really like.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no wrong way to go about this. There really isn't. Play with yarn, play with hooks, and find a fabric that you like. If you're making the bag, just make sure that your squares are close to being the same size, and they'll join together just fine. There's a lot of forgiveness in here because it bends. So if something, if something's a little bit off, I mean, really, where are you ever going to see it?
Right. Okay.
It's not like it's laying flat and you're going to see any sort of wonkiness. Any sort of wonkiness is going to disappear as long as they are mostly the same size. So yeah, we're going for mostly, not perfection. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You are so welcome. It was so good to see everybody.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We'll see you guys later. Take care.